Oh,
You coming?
You're recording. Yep.
Great.
okay.
All right, I texted Christina Maria, Mark, if anybody is out there.
We're gonna go ahead and get started. Hopefully some other committee members will show up. It's very valuable to get Kevin and the lawyers and Cheryl and the rest of us in the same discussion. Especially with this first item, the potential amendments to the town's ordinance regarding town employees. This is a thicket of issues here. And so I just thought what we'd start out by doing is just sort of talking about a roadmap for how we navigate through this. And there are some legal questions that you definitely want to get into. The first issue is the one that was in controversy at the Board of Selectmen meeting, how the rules treat part-time employees and whether they have to be approved by the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen has acted on that question, so I don't think that it's up to us to revisit that, at least with regard to, unless we want to do so with regard to future employees.
Well, no, I think it's important that you change the chapter 44 at least so that we don't have this conflict with why we have it.
Well, we'll talk about chapter 44 definitely, but I don't think we can, if there is a problem, I don't think we can fix it retroactively.
I don't think it's a retroactive issue, but we can talk about it.
Okay. But let's, because with these various issues, we want to sort of define the bylaws and ordinances committee role and the role of the town council.
Liaison.
Hi, Maria. So now we have a quorum.
Thanks, Maria.
So let me ask Nick and Rebecca, is that a fair position that we would not, as a legislative body, try to fix an interpretive matter of how the current rules are being applied? That we really should focus on, if there is to be a change needed, that our role is to focus on prospective hires. Is that right?
I think that's accurate. From our perspective, like you just said, the Board of Selectmen has passed its own resolution, its own policy, so to speak, for what employees will and will not fall under its jurisdiction in terms of at least appointments. And the charter speaks generally in terms of granting that authority broadly to the Board of Selectmen. So in our opinion, that is the Board of Selectmen's role then to define and or delegate if it so chooses. But it's not an issue for the town council. Like I said, it's the Board of Selectmen's real authority by charter. So we believe the Board of Selectmen has the authority to focus that. And it shouldn't be done by some sort of ordinance amendment that the town council has purview over.
Well, maybe not this issue, but more broadly, if there was a policy issue that came up, employment-related policies, are you saying that in no event, nothing in the existing ordinance would give rise to us initiating a change, or do we always have to wait for the selectmen to initiate a change?
No, what's on the books right now, and obviously Rebecca's spent more time going through the details of chapter 44 as it exists now, but we are suggesting revisions to it. We're not suggesting a complete repeal. And so, no, I think there are instances where the town council is in the right to potentially alter what's on the books in order to provide some more general structure and perhaps give the human resources director some more legislative guidance, so to speak, on how to go about doing the day-to-day. And we think that can occur in a manner that is general enough to assist our HR personnel and so forth, but not have to be amended every time there's a potentially conflicting provision in a statute, in a collective bargaining agreement. So we do think there is, we're not recommending a complete repeal of Chapter 44.
Would that even be legal for us to repeal it?
I think it would, actually. There's nothing, I mean, Rebecca can speak to the employment law implications, the more broader potentially constitutional issues that might come about. I say potential, because it's a bit of a gray area if we were to do a complete repeal of Chapter 44. But from my perspective, from the municipal law perspective, looking at where our enabling authority for this ordinance comes from, that's the charter. And there's nothing that I see in the charter that expressly would preclude us from doing away with Chapter 44 or something like Chapter 44 altogether. The charter basically gives the discretion to the Board of Selectmen to recommend to the town council an ordinance like this to effectuate a compensation and classification plan if necessary.
Yeah, so if I could just add on to that, the fact that you have Chapter 44 in place right now means that certain entitlements were codified there. And if we were to just repeal it, what would happen is those entitlements would not have any source of law for where they come from. So if you, for example, one of the more significant provisions is that employees or many employees in the town are employed on a just cause basis. So if you just repeal this, there's nothing, if it's not someone who's got a collective bargaining agreement, it's not someone where there's some other statute or ordinance that abrogates at-will employment for that person, what's happened is you've taken away the ordinance that says that they are terminable only at for just cause, and you haven't replaced it. So it basically, in effect, it's as though you're taking that right away when that's not what you're trying to do. So you just need to be careful that if you do a repeal of Chapter 44, you would otherwise have these rights existing in some other binding way. So the way that I took an initial stab at this was to take Chapter 44, not repeal it, because you have structure there that is holding up other important items, basically saying, let's take things out of Chapter 44 that don't need to be codified and that there's nothing else relying on them. So if we take them out, it's okay, nothing bad is going to happen. And there's not that much that remains, but the things that remain are some of those, again, those more structural things, like how do appointments and dismissals and demotions happen, who does them. That's not things you would put in a handbook because the employee doesn't really care who at the town is firing them or demoting them. They just need to know that the town is doing it. So, but the kind of the separation of powers, some of those core rights like the just cause employment that wouldn't exist anywhere else, the other post-employment benefits section, for example, those just, they need a place to live. So right now they live in Chapter 44, but a lot of Chapter 44 can come out. Some of it's just too specific. Things change with regularity that are, you don't want to have to go to the point of enacting an ordinance every time the law changes. There's some remnants there from the 1960s and requiring male employees to join a civil defense force. I mean, these are things that, the reason they're still there is because people don't usually go back and clean up the statutes and ordinances. And so this is, a good time to kind of get that out and have a flexible structure. So the way that, I'm proposing rewriting this, it includes things like if a collective bargaining agreement provides otherwise, that collective bargaining agreement will prevail, so that you have the flexibility. You negotiate something different, that's fine. You don't need to go and change your ordinances again.
Yeah, and just for everybody's benefit, the reason we're talking about repeal is because in some of the emails that present the history of these discussions, repeal is mentioned as an option. So I just wanted to deal with that.
Well, that's something Cheryl has been talking about for years.
Yeah.
And with the ethics board as well. Can I make a few comments?
But let me just add to that. I did not contemplate that repeal would leave a vacuum. What I was contemplating, what I really had in mind is whether the HR department or the Board of Selectmen could adopt, a set of policy rules that would not involve an ordinance.
That's exactly the comment. We had a meeting last week with Ira and Nick and Rebecca, and we talked about if there's shifted to the Board of Selectmen, that would be the proper place. All surrounding towns don't have their legislative bodies about personnel matters.
Yeah.
And we have a historical, the chapter 44 was adopted by the Board of Selectmen in 1964. Town council did not exist until 1981. So for 56 years, we've only amended it once or twice. Cheryl started the process in 2011. Chris Sharbo, the then town attorney, and Chris Hodgson, and didn't complete it. So it's been considered before, but it has become very problematic and having very conflicting with our handbook. Cheryl started down a road of having a handbook govern and hope that chapter 44 would be repealed. She's talked to you about it several times in the past couple of years, about repealing it or severely amending it. So Rebecca, confirmed last week when we had our call that we could simply move to the Board of Selectmen by ordinance and having the Board of Selectmen show that.
Right.
Which quite frankly is where every other town around us.
Well,
in fact, in Westport, the personnel department does not even select it. So
we can act with more agility. Right now, this ordinance is vast. It's 20 pages of text.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to get the Bylaws and Ordinances Committee to focus when these issues come up and respond as quickly as you could if it were lodged at the. Yeah.
Could someone frame the issue as to why we're doing this? I know you said it conflicts with the handbook. I don't know if Cheryl can answer that or Kevin, but what's the reason that we're looking at this in terms of a bird's eye view?
Rebecca, I'll start and then you can jump in.
Sorry.
I think there's a lot of issues between collective bargaining, our handbook, and chapter 44. There's a lot of conflicts. There's a lot of things in the ordinance that just don't exist. And so I think over the past 11 years, and I've worked with Steve, we've talked about it. There's been a lot of controversy around it. So I think, as we were talking about before, repealing the whole thing is not the answer, but I do think that we need to look at it as Rebecca did and remove the things that are in conflict. And I know the ethics board has looked at it. They had some serious concerns. So I think with Rebecca's first go through of it, which I believe you guys have received, you will see that there's parts in there that if we remove it, it's in the employee handbook or it's already in our collective bargaining agreements.
Yeah, that's right. For example, the complaint procedure, I know was one area we talked about a fair amount. It just wasn't following best practices. It wasn't very clear. What's supposed to happen if an employee has a complaint, let's say, of harassment. And we wanted to kind of streamline all of that and make sure that the people were playing the correct roles in the process. And I think that, especially, I didn't look at the enactment date on that particular policy, but it might well be right around the time that, these laws around harassment were first going into effect. It probably did not have them in mind, specifically as the nature of the kinds of concerns employees might raise. And we wanted to, I remember working with Tucker a lot on this. We were trying to come up with something that was going to give people the correct roles, and there was no way to do that while leaving that portion of chapter 44 intact. So I remember at least flagging at that point that particular provision as being one that needed to be dealt with. But as I took a close look at chapter 44 recently, I saw things that said, that all employees were going to have a pre-hire physical, for example. And I said to Cheryl, do you do that for all your employees? She said, I said, you do it for a secretary? No. Why does the secretary need a pre-hire physical? It's technically it can be done, but that is not commonly done. And if it's not what you're doing, then I don't want that language to be in there. I should really conform with what you're doing, give you the flexibility. So in my revision, it says things like, if the town requests a pre-hire physical, then the employment will happen upon completion of that. Again, giving us the flexibility. I don't want to have to come back and rewrite ordinances every time the law changes. So you'll see there's nothing in there that is substantive in terms of, you know, things like attendance policies or things like, you know, Family and Medical Leave Act. You know, none of that should be in there because those laws change and we deal with that through the handbook.
And so further, Cheryl started on a path of having 2 employee handbooks. One for full-time employees, one for part-time. Part-time employee handbook said you are an at-will employee. Full-time handbook said you are a for-cause employee, right? So in terms of prospectivity, every part-time employee we've hired in the past 10 years has gotten a handbook that says you're at will. I think now Rebecca doesn't like employee handbooks being contracts, but her point is to maintain the for-cause source of authority. It has to be either a board of selectmen policy or in an ordinance. And she would generally not recommend having it in the ordinance, but she doesn't want to have 2 handbooks. She wants to have one source of authority, whether it's a revised ordinance or a board of selectmen policy. So,
Can I ask
Rebecca, that's Rebecca's view.
So what I'm saying about that is kind of, I just want to separate out 2 points. One is, you know, again, in order to maintain that just cause entitlement, we need some legal source of authority that is more than a handbook. A handbook is not a binding document in the sense of, you know, and it has usually disclaimers saying this is, you know, not a contract because, you know, if I say you can be absent 3 times, but I fire you after you're absent 2 times, you know, I don't want someone claiming breach of contract. And there's good case law to support that employee handbooks are not contracts. So if we're going to maintain that just cause entitlement, it needs to be in something stronger and more enduring than an employee handbook that can be revised whenever we feel like it. So now in terms of the idea of having different full-time and part-time employee handbooks, the reason I don't recommend that is that very few things in the law really turn on whether an employee is full-time and part-time. And even those that do utilize different cutoffs. For example, you consider a full-time employee in the town of New Canaan to be someone who works 32 hours a week or more. But for the Affordable Care Act, they're entitled to insurance at 30 hours. So are we going to have a separate handbook for the people who work 30 to 32 hours to tell them that they have health insurance? It doesn't, to me, that doesn't make sense. If you look at the employee handbook, which is primarily telling employees about the rules of their day-to-day employment life. You know, how do you call out sick? What's going to happen if there's a snowstorm? You know, policies that say workplace violence isn't allowed, policies that tell you what to do if you have to report harassment. None of that turns on whether an employee is full-time or part-time. So what we do when we have distinctions is we spell it out, we spell the distinction in the handbook. And I do this all the time, whether it's for private sector employers or public sector employers. We say, for example, you know, you get full-time employees working this many hours get this many vacation days. Part-time employees may get 0 or they may get a prorated amount, but you just spell that out in the handbook. They don't need a separate document. Generally, it really only comes up in terms of benefits. You have the unusual distinction where full-time and part-time status also affects whether they are terminable at will or not. But again, all you need to do is just say that in the handbook. The bulk of the handbook is not about how you can get fired. The bulk of the handbook is about what you're doing in your day-to-day employment. So that really does apply across the board to everybody.
Can we take a step back for a second? Could you tell me what just cause entitlement means, and then at will, and you're using at will and for cause? Can you just define that for us, please?
Sure. So basically in the United States, unless you live in Montana, you live in what is called an at-will state. People don't always realize that's 49 states in this country are at-will states. What that means is the default is that employment is at will, meaning I could fire you for any reason, no reason, I just don't like you. I don't need to have any kind of good reason. And typically employers don't fire people for absolutely no reason, but sometimes it's not something that is, you know, easily articulated, or there's going to be some dispute about it. So employers in general like to have the authority to terminate employment at will. And that also means, you know, the employee is able to leave anytime. They're not under any kind of contract to stay employed. So that's the default, but there are many exceptions to the default. So if there's a contract, now that contract could be a collective bargaining agreement with a union, or it could be an individual employment contract, perhaps.
Can we just stay at a little bit of a more of a high level for now?
But the key issue is,
Yeah. Can you fire the person for no reason or not even a very good reason? And just cause, just to be clear, when it comes to just cause, you're often dealing with an arbitration where an arbitrator is going to want to say your reason was good enough. So it may be that you had to give the person the 15th chance. So it doesn't mean that if you gave them 14 chances that you didn't have a good reason. It's your reason wasn't good enough in the eyes of an arbitrator. So I just don't want to think that it's arbitrary and willy-nilly if you are using employment at will, but that's really the distinction. So
Yeah.
with the part-time employees, they could be fired for any reason. No one's going to be able to say that reason wasn't a good enough reason. And of course, the caveat, you're never allowed to fire someone because of their race, religion, sex, and all of those statuses.
Thank you.
the reason I sent you those articles today, is very important to understand in the public sector, the Supreme Court said that public employees can get a property interest in their job and they are entitled to due process. That doesn't apply to at-will employees. So the default in America, private sector is at will. And if we wanted to classify a certain class of people, not full-time, they can be at will. That's what Cheryl's been doing for a decade, right? So,
And it sounds to me like, well, I want to say two things. First of all, to put a frame around where we are, the Bylaws and Ordinances Committee has got a big learning curve ahead of us to get our arms around how all these documents work together and what the legal issues. So I'm trying to keep it a little bit more high level today. I might say,
I think you need another meeting too.
yeah. Well, at least.
I think we need some background documents,
But
some things to review before we get, it's just, we're coming in line without all the background documents.
did we circulate these?
I didn't get anything other than just that we were having a meeting and what the
Okay.
agenda was.
Well, we'll definitely do that. But I'm going to warn you that I'm going to advocate that we put ourselves in a position where we don't have to study every word in every document. I think you'll like that outcome. Where I think we're, after we meet again, and after we talk about this, I think that the Board of Bylaws and Ordinance Committee might say to Rebecca and Nick, can you do an ordinance in 2 pages? Or 3 pages or whatever, and everything else works, and I think just cause versus at will is plenty good enough reason to have an ordinance if you want to make sure that you've nailed that issue. But a lot of the stuff in here just is repetitive between the handbook and ordinances and this vast complex ordinance that has so many provisions in it is very hard to keep up to date.
One way you could do it, right, would be to say, like Westport, the Board of Selectmen shall adopt the personnel policies, right? And then what Rebecca is recommending on the condition that the Board of Selectmen is going to adopt what Rebecca is recommending as a revised Chapter 44. And the Board of Selectmen, and that gives the authority for the 4 clause. We're looking to preserve the 4 clause authority.
Yeah.
Right? We're looking to preserve the at-will authority.
Right.
And that's, so there's a simple way of doing it, or you can just adopt the revised Chapter 44, which does that in that. And then in the future, we'll make more changes. The reality, we've been trying to do this for a decade.
Well, I don't understand what's the problem. Like what happened that said, oh, we have to figure this out. Like I know the handbook is different from Chapter 44, and it's hard for Cheryl and part-time employee. But did something happen that I've watched the Board of Selectmen meetings.
Well, yeah, before December, I don't think I ever read Chapter 44 to be honest with you.
Oh, right. I'm glad I don't know.
So as far as being relevant, I thought the employee handbook's government. And I learned a lot in December and January when I understood that the policy being proposed was not the right policy for the town. So
the specific issue that triggered all this is, does the Board of Selectmen have to approve appointments of part-time employees?
That's what I thought.
And it was a difference of opinion, and it raised the question of where do you look for guidance? And as soon as you start looking, you realize it's all inconsistent. And then Kevin gave a nice, which we'll also share, a nice background email that explained how they've been trying to solve this issue, because it's a gnawing issue. It keeps on giving over time. It gets worse. And so it would certainly simplify matters from our point of view if we could offload much of this thing of this process to the Board of Selectmen. And one of my questions is, in operation, do you plan to come to the town council very often to administer these rules?
Well, can I say, you know, when you look at ordinances, almost all ordinances deal with what the public, well, how the town released the rights and rules that we create for the public. This is unusual because it was adopted by the Board of Selectmen when the Board of Selectmen was the legislative body of the town in 1964. It became part of the code, and every towns around us got away from that approach, and they put it back into the Board of Selectmen because that's where it belongs. The administration of personnel matters should be in the hands of the selectmen and not in an ordinance.
So are you suggesting,
I would go with full repeal, but make sure, as Rebecca wants, the Board of Selectmen is going to adopt the right provisions as policy of the selectmen for personnel.
We would not leave a vacuum.
Yeah, you can't leave it back.
no, I get that. And that's my question is, would we repeal and
Why
Well-
don't we just clean up chapter 44?
Because we'd have
Well,
to do it every year.
that's the intermediate way. She's limited by 80% of it.
Yes, so can't like our lawyers do
So
that and we.
I suggest
really,
repeal and replace.
why can't they update it? Why can't they edit chapter 44?
She added that.
I think, and I think the two alternatives seem to be, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong. One alternative is, as Mr. Moynihan is proposing, is that we repeal it.
Yeah.
And then it goes to the Board of Selectmen and we wash our hands of it.
Right.
Or two, you guys adopt what Rebecca has suggested, or two, we amend the ordinance to reflect everything that Rebecca's done. It's just whether we want to repeal, if we're comfortable repealing it and sending it all to the hands of Board of Selectmen for us
And as
to.
part of repeal, it's safe.
You have chapter 44, the legislative body is still part of.
Yeah. I mean, but I think it's interesting that you did say that the Board of Selectmen was the legislative body at the time. Now there is a legislative body.
Right, so now.
Why?
But all the towns have taken out of the
Right,
legislature.
no, I understand.
They put it entirely in the Board of Selectmen. Well, this is a perfect example by charter revision, sometimes it's necessary. This requires that you repeal and say instead that the administration of personnel matters shall be with the Board of Selectmen and the personnel department.
So
That
you're
would be a
saying-
simple way, like Westport does it.
So if we adopt,
Repeal.
if we repeal,
Yeah.
then it necessitates us opening the charter.
No, just because you have charter authority, you can just delegate it. You can say, under this charter division, we're going to give it back to the Board of Selectmen. Because you're basically saying here, Board of Selectmen should recommend policies to you, but they can also adopt policies.
Yeah.
Steve, so 2 points. One, Rebecca, do you have a red line version of what you're proposing that you can send to the committee so we can see it?
Yes, I have sent that to, I'm not sure if, I guess this is a subset of the committee, but there are folks in the room who have it, so they can ensure it gets to everybody.
We'll send that around. Thank you, Rebecca. And I mean, you can see why, you know, going back, I was actually with Chris Hodson back when Chris Jarbo went through this in 2011, and every time we did it, we came to the same conclusion. It was such a messy mess. Even back then, they couldn't figure it out, and they couldn't get it to us to figure out. So we went back and forth a couple of times and said, all right, I'm just going to leave it alone for now. And Cheryl and I have talked about this over the years. And until we actually sit down and go word for word through that chapter, you know, and it's a pretty big job doing it the way we're talking about doing it, and putting that chapter back in order. We can do it that way or kick it to the Board of Selectmen. But to Hillary's point, if it is a legislative body, I don't know. There is that check and balance that I never like to give up.
What the intention is.
Well,
yeah, unless Cheryl, from the town's perspective, is Cheryl, if you're saying you have to do it this way, then, you know.
what do you mean?
Have to do a lot like
Have to do it. Is there any, and Kevin's point is good. Other towns are doing it a certain way. And if we're lagging behind the way we should be doing it, then we should hear about it.
I think as we've spoken with both Nick and Rebecca, I think towns do it very differently. Westport, yes, they have one statement. Most of the communities that we've checked in Fairfield County, when you look at their ordinances, they are putting it off to their Board of Selectmen. As I've said in the past, I think this is an issue that we need legal guidance. We need to kind of hear from them what we should do. But if we were to fully repeal it, then the Board of Selectmen would have to adopt and I think Rebecca can talk to this so that we don't lose that just cause. And that's why we've had such issues in the past, because employees get very worried about that when they hear that this section is completely being repealed. So.
Yeah, and I want to say one thing that does differentiate New Canaan from a number of other towns is the fact that the default rule for so many employees is just cause. I think that that makes it a little bit more difficult to untangle this without affecting things we're not trying to affect. But you know, most other towns don't have that as the default. I think, you know, it's fine that you have it this way. It makes sense that you have it this way. But that makes it a little bit harder to make some of the changes, or to say, well, we're just going to do what another town does.
You know, I'm sorry.
I have a quick question, more practical question. Now that there's ordinance, and then there are these 2 handbooks. Is there anything in the ordinance that says you have to have 2 handbooks? I mean, could you literally just combine it into one?
There's one.
No, they were saying
I highly, yeah, there's nothing that says that. There's no reference to the handbooks. I highly recommend the one handbook. I have, in the email where I sent the revisions to chapter 44, I also sent proposed revisions to the handbook in order to kind of bring everybody into the fold of that handbook. And the revisions were minimal. I mean, it basically would just occasionally say, and here's how it is for the part-timers, or, you know, so it really wasn't, it's not a significant difference, because it really is the same for almost everything. And so there's no reason you have to have 2. I think it's confusing to have 2. I think you have a high risk of error when you have 2. So I would not recommend continuing that way.
You don't have to change your practice.
Can we just do that?
Almost 10 years.
One for part-time, one for part-time, one for full. Oh, I apologize.
And my view was part-time is somewhat shorter because there are some things that don't apply.
All I'm saying is that for that matter in particular, can't we just start doing one? I mean, can't we just consolidate to one regardless of, because I don't want to just think already about that. No, I understand that. But what I'm saying is that we have to, it's a practical question. We don't have to like figure out this repeal. You can, we can have one, you can fix that problem like today, right? Just doing one handbook, just to help you.
But the handbook isn't law.
The handbook.
Right.
I know that.
No, I get that.
I'm separating those 2 things. It sounds like that was a problem that is really like driving some of this. So I'm just wondering if you can just at least take care of that, and then we have to figure out how else we have to, you know, we have to do contracts, because you can't base all this just on a handbook. You have to have this as law. I get that.
Since at will is the default in Connecticut, if you have a handbook that was given to a part-time employee that says at will, that's why it's not a prospective versus retroactive question.
You're getting that fixed, is what I'm saying.
Part-time is if you, unless you have for cause made clear to you, which we've never done with part-time employees.
Right.
They default to at will, and they begin a handbook in the past that says you're at will.
Yeah, but
We have employees right now we want to consider to be at will.
But
The handbook can say both, and it frequently does say both. You know, for example, for most towns, it will say you are an employee at will unless you are subject to a collective bargaining agreement, right? It's very normal, and in my revisions, it does address that. There's no, you know, you can speak to at will and non-at will employees at the same time through a handbook, and that is what is typically done.
You don't need approval from anyone to get that done.
That's right. That's right.
whoa, no, I don't agree with that.
Cheryl can do that. Cheryl can do that tomorrow if she wishes. She can do that tomorrow.
What I want to say is that don't forget that we have an ordinance on the books. So you have to be consistent with the ordinance.
And that's what my question is. Can we just do that, or do we have to figure out this first before we go? And
We can't walk out of this process saying that.
You're right, Tom. What Cheryl's point is, there's a lot in the handbook that conflicts with chapter 44, because chapter 41 is not going to come out.
But it has nothing to do with the fact that you're.
We've been doing that for at least a decade. When we adopted the handbook.
I get that.
Well, but now that we're here,
Let's get rid of the conflict.
let's fix it.
Can we study this before we keep talking about it? Because I feel like we're not all on the same page, and I feel like we're kind of spinning our wheels. Like none of us have seen the original document. I haven't read chapter 44. You know, I'm trying to get basic operational definitions of things. I mean, instead of wasting your time, I don't know, you guys are the chairs, but I feel like we need more, you know, background that we prepare to have this discussion.
Well, I just want a couple of quick comments. Sheriff?
No, I would agree. I think it's important to look at the original chapter 44. We have made the revisions with Rebecca. You have the full-time handbook, you have the part-time policy, so that you can kind of put all of this together as you're starting to understand it.
Yeah, and I'll say, if you look at the handbook with the red line, which is in that set of documents that I emailed around, you'll be able to see exactly where I identified that there was a distinction between full-time or part-time, or where we needed to change the verbiage. You'll see it's not in all that many places.
A couple of quick points. One is that, and I applaud you for wanting to do the homework, and you should do the homework. Great, you'll be more informed. However, the idea of us maintaining this in an ordinance structure and monitoring and reviewing and comparing with other documents implies that we have a level of expertise that we do not have, okay? I don't want to be, if I'm going to be running our policies out of this ordinance, if I'm going to try to structure an ordinance to drive our policies, I want to be a lot more comfortable with the substantive issues that are raised on every page. If we're going to act to adopt a new ordinance, I want to develop a comfort level that I don't have anywhere close, and it's not that's not one night of reviewing documents that would get me there.
I was
So,
a few minutes, but no.
take as many as you want. So,
Experts like present sort of.
well,
Yeah.
but
That's
frankly,
I mean, we have, so my question, and obviously we need to move on from this at some point, but you know, we have Cheryl, we have Nick, and we have Rebecca on the line right now. So can you guys, I mean, I think you've all come to an agreement of what the best course of action for the town is. So can you articulate that so we can go in the right direction here? I mean, I'm assuming that all three of you are on the same page, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so can someone summarize what you guys think the best thing for us to do is?
Let me see if I could take a stab at it. And there's one part where you really have a choice where I don't have a recommendation one way or the other, but significantly revise and or repeal and replace chapter 44. And so the repeal and replace would be where it becomes Board of Selectmen policy, or significantly revise it as an ordinance using the red line version that I sent out. Where one thing you may note too is that it is significantly reduced. It is much shorter because there is so much that doesn't need to be there.
4 pages total.
4 pages.
Rebecca's red line.
So, thank you. I couldn't get the formatting till I could actually figure that out. So I appreciate that, Nick. So that's number one is.
Hold on, Rebecca, we got a question.
I have a question. Can you hear me? Can you hear us? Because sometimes it doesn't work. So the choices are revise, that's one choice, and the other choice is repeal and replace. Those are our 2 choices?
In terms of what would be recommended, yes. So
okay, I wanted to clarify that before we go on. Thank you.
And then so that takes care of chapter 44. And then in terms of the handbook, this isn't something that you need to take action on, but my recommendation would be to use the revised handbook that I recently circulated to Cheryl et al. And to use that as a single handbook. Every town employee gets the same handbook, and it differentiates within it what their respective rights are. The way the handbook's been revised, it doesn't change anybody's rights, it just spells them out. And so as much as possible throughout this process, I've tried not to change anybody's rights, but only to clarify what we are doing.
So
Board of Selectmen approved the handbook in 2012.
Yeah.
Board of Selectmen can revise it. So
if Rebecca, if we revise chapter 44, we're leaving in the legislative body and the Board of Selectmen as part of the hiring and firing process, versus if we repeal and replace, that takes out the legislative body and goes straight to the Board of Selectmen. Is that correct?
I did not change who has authority anywhere within my revisions to chapter 44. All I have done is taken provisions that don't need to be codified out of the code.
The authority is always, absent a charter revision, going to rest with the Board of Selectmen. That's what our charter says right now. So that's what I said before. If the Board of Selectmen, by its own policy, wants to delegate those appointment and or dismissal powers for certain individuals, it's willing to do so. But we don't believe that that can be done by a change to this ordinance. You guys, the town council, can't pass an ordinance that changes who's the appointing authority.
Nick, just to follow up though, there, you know, we've been doing this for Kevin and I, and some of us have been around for a long time, and I think 16 years. We've never had a town employee issue come to the council for any reason.
And you're still with.
Yeah, no, you would.
Yeah. I mean, so
yeah.
On the other hand, Kathleen Corbett had made the point that the board charter says appoint and dismiss. That's giving due process rights to part-time employees under our current framework.
Is that the attorney's opinion that is the case? Because I'd like to understand that. Because I think that is a fun.
It's only one page.
No, but I'm saying.
Dismissal involves due process.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that question.
That's the charter.
Which one's the premier? But is that tied to
But I would propose that it be addressed with the department managers, because if they want to fire a lifeguard on the spot or camp counselor or something, that shouldn't have to go through a process.
Does that
That's where the selectmen should have that decision to say department manager shall do this.
So you could delegate that.
We could delegate that.
But if you appoint someone, does that mean they get due process through the dismissal? Is that why you're trying to figure that
Yeah,
out?
because we have to be able to dismiss people on the spot if they're temporary employees or people that if they don't work out, they got to be gone immediately.
But is that the whole thing? Like if you appoint someone, Kathleen wants approval versus you just want to have a list from Cheryl and you don't want to approve it? Is that one? That's
Like I said, the appointment, my view is when you approve a list of names and you don't know anything about their backgrounds,
right.
that's not an appointment. It's an approval of something, because all we've done in the past is recreation department for some strange reason, right? Approving a list is not really appointment, and dismissal shouldn't be part of the discussion. And the selectmen can decide to do that.
And they're tied together legally. is what you're-
I think they're tied together.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Just a second on the charter. I hear what you said, Nick, about it doesn't rule out repeal, but it does say the selectmen shall review and revise or establish when necessary, which I guess is the magic.
That's what I'm looking at, Tom. Yep.
A plan of classification and compensation.
And classification could include not only classifications that we did in terms of framework of full-time employees, but also just saying part-time employees are different than full-time employees. That classification is important.
Could this give the power, and not any particular person, I'm just thinking about this, it's not you, but could the first selectman just decide to fire someone and have no oversight from anyone else? No one else could weigh in on that.
You mean a part-time or full-time?
Either.
No, just
No.
part-time,
Just
because
No
full-time
So-
employees, you need just cause.
So they could just unilaterally just fire someone without any, or hire someone without anyone else approving.
Not this first one.
I'm saying-
Other first selectmen don't have to do that.
So you
Not
can't,
me.
I mean, so that's, again, I don't think it's personal, I'm just trying to figure out what.
It doesn't say here that it would be the manager of the person. It just says that you could.
Because I know
walk by the person and say, I don't like that,
Concerns
like fire them.
Yeah.
Is there some provision we can put
It can
in
be
there
what
that
we-
has to come from the
Full-time
manager?
employees have to give me lateral bill rights under the Supreme Court's decision, so.
So where I am is like, I'm voting for the page and a half, because I just want to make a comment real quickly. If I were in charge of writing this ordinance and setting these policies, I would make different decisions than are in there. I don't think anybody should care about that. I don't think anybody should care what I think an employment policy should be, or what wording is the best way to articulate it. I want the town council to have a limited scope. I want you guys to come back with a page and a half ordinance that we can study and we can master that. But not, I don't think we should be in the position of having to justify this 20-page document with this 20-page document, partly because it's not just a question of consistency. It's a question of whether I even agree with the provisions.
But it's not 20 versus 20. 20 versus 4 versus 1.5. That's
Well, the handbook's more than 4 pages.
What's the revised?
the revised.
The revised chapter.
The revised chapter 44.
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about, like, Cheryl, I think you said that employees are concerned that if we repeal it, they're not gonna have just cause. And I think that's not a good thing. I think they should feel secure in their jobs and things like that. So does that go?
And I think if we repeal it, we really have to lean on Nick and Rebecca to make sure whatever the policy is that the Board of Selectmen approve holds that standard in place. Because I think, as Rebecca had stated, we have to be very careful with just pulling all of that out in today's law. So.
Yeah. And there's, again, that other post-employment benefits section. That was another piece that was important to leave in place, just because it has to exist somewhere.
But I feel like, just kind of from a business background, on the face of the decision like this, and I'm not the expert, I ask experts to come forward with options, right? So it's not just this is the only recommendation, but hey, here's my recommendation, here are other options that could be considered, and then you decide on it. I agree. Us going through that, we were not the experts, and we made the wrong decision because we maybe misunderstand something, but I also don't think there may be one way of doing it. So there should be a recommendation and maybe options that we would look at.
I don't think that we should defer to experts unless we know what's in the documents. I'm fine with getting recommendations, but I don't think that we should just take the easy way out and say, well, make your recommendations. We're going to take a 40-page document, make a 4. That looks good to me. I think we have to know what they're editing out. I'm not saying they said that, but I think we have to know what they're taking out.
Yes.
Because these are people's livelihoods. They've been here and working for 20 years. So I think we have to take this really seriously. I mean, that's
and you've got the red line version now.
Okay,
So
yeah.
you'll see this, you'll see what is being excised,
Right.
recommended to be edited out and what's not. Just a point of clarification, are there part-time employees that don't work for a like middle manager in town that work directly for you or work directly at the behest of the Board of Selectmen? I'm just trying to think through scenarios where
That's what I'm.
Like, what about like Bob? Isn't he?
It's not getting the individual name.
Oh, sorry.
there. I'm just curious, like how many?
We have several full-time, part-time employees in the building.
Yeah.
In different departments.
That's
Some are, a couple of years, some will for a couple of months, all depends on the situation.
no, I understand that. My question is more to Rita's point about oversight.
Yeah.
If we were to repeal, I don't know, having an ordinance doesn't give us power.
Impact,
I know.
how does it impact any current employee?
No, I know.
Because every
No.
part-time employee got a part-time handbook.
I'm not asking that question. That's not the question I'm
And
asking.
at will is the default for those 300 employees.
I understand.
Unless there's an inconsistency with the ordinance, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not what.
unless they
Rebecca
get
said.
appointed.
So,
Anyway, so that's not my.
Yes.
So,
I'm in the legislature. I'm not in the executive, so it's not my problem.
but to summarize, we had 3 opinions there saying, the red line version is kind of what they recommend. And then we have a page and a half of another idea. And we should basically, those are the 2 decisions. I mean, to me.
But in any event, you're doing an ordinance, you're repealing the 20 pages, you're saying instead, something else.
Yeah.
You have to, you want to have, because it's in the charter, you have the authority to do an ordinance in this area. And Westport has a very brief ordinance. Personnel department handles this. That's the way they have a very short process, not even the Board of Selectmen.
So you could really shorten it up.
Yeah, really short.
Rebecca, I'll send you an email, but I tried to look at your red line and I didn't understand which things are being deleted and whatever, so I'll need help with that, but.
Sure, and the way that it was sent to me, the formatting was a little strange. It was kind of a table format.
Hello, something must be wrong with the microphone. I'm not done talking yet. The document, I printed it out and it wasn't 4 pages. It was more like 16 pages.
Because that's what's blank.
Yeah.
Look at this pagination.
Well, no, 16 pages of print. Anyway, we'll have to get that clarified. But yeah, we don't have to. We don't plan to solve this tonight.
Right.
So everybody will get all the documentation. This was just a primer to try to tee up the issues, and you know where we're trying to go with it. And we'll come back and we'll do this again. Maria.
There's a
I see
question.
a question.
I just, Tom, I have the same issue with the red line version. I'm not seeing any of the edits. So if we got a PDF of the red line.
Sure.
I think my iPad is trying to open it in Office, and that's how you usually see the red line edits. So maybe a PDF with the edits would help.
I can work with Rebecca and we'll make sure we get copies out so you can see what was redlined.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you guys for your time.
Our pleasure. Nice seeing everyone.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
until next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for moving.
Yeah, that's my specialty.
Next item is a proposed language regarding town council nominated Buchanan Library trustees.
Okay, I'm just gonna pull up that language that I sent, but so I sent around proposed language regarding the town appointed library trustee fees. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull it up right now.
What we're doing is, excuse me, but what we're
Yeah.
doing is we're about to appoint these individuals and we want to give them guidance about what their role is going to be. That's sort of the
Yes.
the gist of it.
So per the memorandum of understanding, which I had up on my iPad and then it tried to update, the town, or actually the town council chairperson
Thank you for that.
gets to appoint, no, sorry, does not get to appoint. I want to make sure I use the correct language, gets to nominate 2 members of the public or whomever to serve on the library's board of trustees, subject to the library board accepting those nominations, right? They have.
That's already in the MOU.
Yeah, that's in the MOU. I'm just giving,
The MOU.
yes, I'm giving background, but that's what the MOU provides. So what we tried to do is provide a little bit more guidance to those who might serve in those capacities or might be nominated in those capacities. So.
And part of this is because, a little background is because when the library went to the nominees to ask to serve, they said, oh yeah, we're excited for the library. And they said, well, we need this portion, we need this part of the,
Hey, is this for the wetlands?
No,
Down the other end of the hall.
Oh, sorry.
that's okay.
we need, we'd like a little more background in terms of, we kind of understand the library part of it, but we need more background in terms of what is the town looking for and how often do we have to report and all that. So that's kind of why we should at least put a sentence or 2 together to say, this is what these folks are going to be doing, how many times a year they're doing it. Because I don't know that it specifies how many times they report to the council in the MOU. So those are the things that we kind of have to pin down, so.
You want to read what you're.
Sure.
Right?
So this is what I circulated, which you've all should have gotten in your email. As per the memorandum of understanding between the town of New Canaan and the New Canaan Public Library, the MOU, the chairperson of the New Canaan Town Council shall nominate 2 individuals to the library's board of trustees, also called the town nominated trustees, henceforth. The town nominated trustees are subject to approval by the library in the same manner it conducts when approving any new library trustee, and are subject to the same attendant obligations and rights as any other library trustee. So it essentially puts these 2 in the same position and the same place as other library tapped nominees to the board. The town nominated trustees shall not be members of the same political party. So we have a little argument already there. Once approved by the library, the town nominated trustees shall report to the town council twice per year on topics consistent with their governance role as trustees of the library. And I don't, truth be told, you know, despite knowing a lot of people quite well that are on the board of trustees, I don't actually know the full scope of what their responsibilities and duties are. So the way I would envision this is to have them come at least the first time they present to us and give us some background on what a library trustee does, what kind of decisions they make, what kind of work they do as members of the board. Are you a member of the board?
I'm an ex officio member. Keep in mind, the craziness is the building is built now. And
Yeah.
the MOU was really all about the building and the bond being outstanding. When I go to a trustee meeting and they always conflict with the Board of Finance, it's an operational meeting. What is the library doing as a library? So you run the board.
Yeah.
So, but honestly, I guess it's nice to have representation. We have 2 Board of Finance liaisons from the Board of Finance that stay in touch with the library and make their recommendations when the budget comes around.
And the director comes and reports to the council a couple times a year too. So that's.
There's people that say there should be, more people nominated for the town, because until 1947, the library board met on the town meeting and town meeting of the town, and there was much more participation in the town. But anyway, it is what it is, and it's an independent nonprofit and a great association library. So,
But it is true that the clear understanding with the library was that these people, their jobs would be
you can't have 2 masters.
their duty is to the library.
The library. Right.
And
I go as an observer.
there are no real exceptions to the fact that they're obligated to live in that world, those obligations.
It's that what we have is the responsibility, I guess, under the MOU to nominate these people, but
Right.
once that's done.
Yeah.
I mean, we can ask them to come and report to us again in their role,
Right.
their governance role as board of trustees members.
And I'm sorry, but your point about having them come in as the first meeting is perfect and report what they're doing. The problem is they're both new and they have no idea, you know, that, so we need.
Well, I
They
would
would
have
have to
to comment, so
accompany-
they've had a couple of.
Yeah,
weeks,
okay,
like,
so
I would
maybe-
First date that they
yeah,
come in, let them.
6
have a
months
couple
already,
of
yeah.
weeks.
Come after the annual meeting at the library, but then they get the feedback from the public members, you know, who go to the annual meeting as well.
I'm unclear. I mean, I understand I'm trying to figure out what they're doing, but I'm just, like, what are we trying to get out of this? Like, what kind of information is the town
Good
council? That's what I'm really
Well, I'd like
curious
to
about.
address that issue. Could we change, instead of their governance role as trustees, to report on matters relevant to the town, including the budget? And I mean, my overall question is, why aren't the library meetings public, and why don't we get public minutes? But in other words, I think what we're trying to get out of it, at least what I think I'd like to get out of it, is like, we give 75% of the operating budget. What is that being used for? What are the processes? Stuff that's relevant to taxpayers, even though it's an association library. We don't hear anything about the meetings because they're private, but I've heard that in the past they were public. So I'm confused as to why it's not, well, we can't just look at the minutes. I mean, you
I'm
know.
not sure about that. Can I make one comment? In addition to the Board of Finance liaison, Board of Selectmen has responsibility to oversee the library. Any body that receives taxpayer dollars, the Board of Selectmen. So technically, the Board of Selectmen are responsible for looking at their annual 1099 and that kind of stuff.
But you said you go there and you don't say anything. Because you're.
No, that's me personally as ex officio member. That's different than the Board of Selectmen's responsibility on the charter.
I see.
Right, so we got a lot of oversight. And the primary one being the annual budget, so.
Yeah, and I think that that's a fair question to have, you know, if that's an update that's within their scope, if they know that by virtue of being on the board of trustees, they can come and give us that update. About, you know, I picture it like how many people are coming through the door. It's how many, you know, what.
Yeah, what concerts you're having or what, yeah, I don't even know what the question
I think most houses are serving, houses are serving there, it's one of the conditions, I would think.
But I think they take up strategic, you know, goals, not just building a new building. And I don't know what those are. You know, I think it changes because they're a moving, grooving, evolving organization. You know, so it's not just nuts and bolts. It's like, well, what are they trying to bring more people into the library through this means? You know, it's not just nuts and bolts. It's also strategy and what their plans are.
That's interesting. Yeah, could the director do that? I guess.
Well, I think there's a difference between, and again, this is why I want them to, I would love for them to come in so we know what the board of trustees, what their role is. They aren't the operational arm of the library. Lisa and the librarian and those guys are. So I think we need to be clear in delineating what their responsibility. We can't. They're supposed to be full members of that we're just nominating. In fact, I don't even know, is there a reporting requirement in the MOU that they come back to us? Or are we imposing that upon them?
No, I think it mentions a couple times a year that they come back and.
I mean, I don't want to impose, we have to get people who, one, want to serve on the library board, who, two, will make a financial commitment to serve on the library board. And if they think they're coming in to talk about things that are beyond the scope of that would be more appropriate for Lisa or somebody who does the operational day-to-day, that's going to turn people away.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to be clear about that. And to Kevin's point and to Steve's point, there's no divided loyalties. They don't have their loyalty lies, frankly, if you're a board of trustee. It's just like being on the board of a company or a nonprofit.
It's just sharing.
It's just coming to share information, maybe more than we would get because Lisa's super busy. She comes to us during the budget time, but we shouldn't require more of them than any other board of trustee member.
Do we need to wait to find out what they do? Can't we just ask somebody like what?
Well, so in the past, you know, and we some of our meetings and months have gone by and we're so busy doing legislative stuff. But in the past, when we've had time, we've had organizations like the library and like the New Canaan Community Foundation and other nonprofits come in and present to us and say, hey, what's going on? And give us a full, you know, give us 10 minutes, 15 minutes of what's going on in your world, to mainly to highlight their programming and all the good that they're doing. And, you know, we just haven't been doing that because they've had big projects going on and, you know, the library has been so busy. It's like, you know, another meeting, I got to come and tell you what I'm doing. Come on.
Well, then that makes sense to me. If it was, okay, we took the time, but we have these two representatives who are listening in, who have the latest and greatest, and they come in and they're telling us updates on strategy and what's going on and sharing information. It's almost like one of the committee reports that we do.
But
right?
we
Similar
can't,
to that.
but we can't ask them to share more, like if there's important strategic
No,
discussions
no.
that are going on, they can't
Right.
disclose that. So that's why we drafted this very generally to cover their role in governance, because if you start
Public information.
getting totally specific.
But I guess it brings me back to my question, maybe Kevin can answer, why are there not public meetings? Why is
I
that
don't
not open to the
know, I
public?
don't, you know, they had this thing about they were subject to FOIA and then they finally got legal opinion, they're not subject to FOIA.
Right.
That may be connected to that. I don't really know. Well, I'll tell you one thing, I just discovered the reason why they're no longer elected at the town meeting, because the charter says, pursuant to the provisions of special acts of 1947, number, the library directors of the town of McKinney shall not be elected by the electors of the town or be appointed by any officer or officer of the town. So prior to 1947, the library directors were elected at the town meeting by the voters of McKinney.
They're paid fully right by the.
Right, so there's, you know, the history, I guess, I don't know, were they a nonprofit at the time? I was trying to, I won't see through, but the point is they are an independent nonprofit, no longer subject to FOIA according to their attorneys.
Well, according to a court opinion, a FOIA court opinion, because it did, right?
But there was another court opinion before that that said that they were, and they opened up the meetings, and then they had subsequent, I don't remember the year on that, but that. They
But
opened
if
up.
a later decision comes down, then that's the precedent.
But it shows
There's
that
no
there was a
conflicting.
bit of, you know, confusion to me.
Oh, regardless.
But I've always, I mean, I think the town in general looks at the library as, you know, we're the brother, they're the sister. I mean, it's like, we're one family. It's not like, you know, there's not that, oh my gosh, what are they doing? It's
Yeah,
like,
but
we're
brothers and
welcoming.
sisters talk to each other and they
Well,
get to
and-
sit at the same table, so why aren't we all sitting at the same?
Well,
table,
as Kev-
sharing the same information? Why does it have to be so proprietary? Like, well, they might not be able to talk about this because they're on the board. To me, there should be open public meetings, given that we give 75% of the budget, and I don't want to go, I know this is a larger issue, but I just would like to see a bigger scope of what they're gonna report as kind of like a compromise on some level, because I think the people that take this role know that it's a bigger role. than
It's
just
not
being
that.
a
That's
trustee.
not-
That's not what the MOU contemplated.
It's only,
But we have
the
the
only
ability
thing that
to
we're doing is we're saying that Rita and Kim twice a year come into the council out of our board. You two are gonna go to the council and you're gonna report what's going on in our world. That's all that it is. I mean, it's not like any more than that. They're board of trustees for the library. That is their job. The only other thing that's above and beyond their job is twice a year, one or two of them would come in and report.
Right.
And as Kevin said earlier, there is so much oversight on this library already between Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, the Town Council. We've got liaisons to the library. We've got, I mean, you're gonna start adding all these things up. Like, how much more are we gonna ask
Well,
them to
the
do?
public doesn't see that though. So unfortunately, there's
The
a lot
public-
of-
the public is o-
does
but the
not
pub-
get those reports.
The
And
public
you
is,
can
the
look at
public,
any report,
the public
and you
is
can
invited
look
to
at
every single meeting we have though. We're like so transparent and
No,
out in the
it's
open
not
about it.
council, we
And
don't
Board of
usually
Selectmen
get
and Board of
single
Finance.
updates about the library and the whole, you know. I have to say that might be true, but the public does not get that detailed level of information.
And to your point, they're archived, those videos that we all do are all archived. So I mean, it's, if you want to research and look at that, you could look back
But the archives
10 years
that
of
have-
meetings and all the library stuff over the years, you can see all that. I mean, that's all there. Not the
Yeah,
library,
I
meetings, but
know,
all
I
of our.
haven't seen it.
There's a raised hand,
Yes.
Maria.
Maria,
I
we
made it
can't hear you, Maria. We
Oh,
still
still-
can't hear you.
You're on
You're
mute.
muted.
Okay,
Oh, there you go. You're good.
back.
We
Except
can
now,
hear you.
I do recall though, you know, the two extra trustee members coming about as part of getting, you know, giving the library $10 million. And I think it was just a way to be more involved in what's going on behind the scenes at the library. I don't think it's any more than that. But what I wanted to say is, will these two appointed members be expected to make a donation to the library as part of being a trustee, and how much would that be?
Well, it's whatever applies to the other trustees. There's not a special rule for these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no difference between them and another
I
body.
have a real problem with that. I mean, I think the, $1.3 million that the library receives from the town should be enough for these town appointed trustees. So I don't think that should, I think that's prohibitive, that someone should only be allowed to be a trustee if they pay the fee to become a trustee every year. I don't think that's right.
It's not every year. And
at all.
I'm sorry, I'm pulling up the MOU right now.
So Hillary, just while you're pulling that up, one of the things that we all need to remember, and we all need to go push the rewind button and go back. There was so much risk involved in the town and in the council thinking, oh my gosh, we're about to give the library $10 million. We're going to give the library $10 million. We need oversight. We need to figure this out. Well, since then, if you fast forward, the library has literally paid back and raised much of that money. And the risk to the town keeps going down and down and down. I mean, to me,
We're not talking alone.
listen, understood.
We got the building.
But that was the whole impetus of this whole thing. Like, oh my gosh, the town's at risk. Well, we're not at risk for anything.
No,
I mean,
well, we got a building.
yeah. So
let me just make one observation. One of the reasons that I'm sensitive about this subject is that we're going to be asking two actual real individuals to walk into this role. And I don't want them to be in the middle of a fight like this.
right.
I want to be clear to them that all they need to worry about is to be a trustee based on the way the library does that. However, that's what we agreed to do.
Yeah.
Now, when they come in front of us, we're not handing out gags. You can ask them anything you want. I mean, it's free country, you're the town council, you can ask them stuff. But I want them to know that when they decide on what to comment on, the first place they should look is they have to look is their loyalty to the library. And if they don't, in that role, and also their knowledge base, if they don't have a mastery over the budget at a certain point in time, and say, I can't help you with that. And they're going to answer any way they want. But I think one of the values that we get out of having these people is that the names that have come up so far are exceptional people. And I think they add to the quality of the board experience at the library. So that to me is good. If something were to go wrong, they would, I'm sure, set out an alarm. But what they might be expected to do or what battle they're going to be in the middle of,
I think their identity is confusing for a reason. So I understand you want to not make it that way, but we're having this discussion because it's kind of like town council, library trustee, what are they doing? Why are we even doing this? So it just happens to be what we're discussing. Well, even though we want it to be clear, I think it's their identity is confusing, at least to me. So
it shouldn't be, because the MOU, both the MOU and this proposed language says we nominate them. We are not appointing them, guys. The library still has to agree to these.
Yeah,
we don't have power to just put two people that we want on the board. So we nominate, and that's sort of the extent of this. Doesn't have a reporting requirement in the MOU. I'm trying to that language enforces a report.
I think
we don't have to do that. There's a misunderstanding.
I think we have the ability to make it a little bit more specific since we're doing this. So,
well, I mean,
it is very general.
I mean, are you? Yeah. Some of what I'm hearing is whether or not we should, the doubt of whether or not we should even do this. I mean, are we putting two people that are highly respected in this town in the middle of something that we really can't define? I mean, I'm still struggling with, and I've looked at the language, but I'm struggling with. There's two people that are going to be super loyal to the library because that's their job. And they're coming off that board and they're entering our world to basically give an update on what's going on at the library.
And they represent the library.
And they represent the library.
They're like, yeah. And listen, this says to ensure it, the only thing now that I'm reading this provision of the MOU, it imposes on the library that they amend its bylaws to allow for the nomination of someone. It doesn't actually say we subject to approval by the library. It doesn't say they have to accept who we put forward.
Right.
Well, but that's
that was part of the MOU because they have
but, you know, in the library's defense, they want to be cooperative and they want to, you know, they want this to be smooth and like, you know, it's the right thing to do. If we ask them to do it, of course they're going to do it.
I also feel like we need to back up and decide what we want to understand and realize whether or not these are the two people that are going to give us the information. Like, I think we have to establish what information we really want to know first, and then figure out if these are even the two people that can provide that for us, and or maybe it's not them. Like maybe this is.
But why would it be based on?
No, I'm saying because it sounds like there's a misunderstanding that people are thinking these people are different than what they actually are in that.
But all you have to do is, I understand that you might have that confusion, but that confusion is solved when you read the MOU, right? You read the language, but it's, I don't understand where the confusion is.
What takes legal precedence, the MOU or the ordinance?
What ordinance?
We're just putting forward language, we're not.
The town has agreed. As a relationship with the library, I mean,
We just want to put some, I call them guide rails on.
Accomplish what people want.
It's a rider, if you
it
will.
would just be like a resolution.
Yeah.
A letter.
Like a letter or.
This is a rider on the MOU.
I think it could just be a resolution of the town.
This is
council.
a resolution. Can I just finish my point for a second, though, which is, I guess what I'm saying is, we're going to all this trouble to try to get these two people on there, and it may not be accomplishing what folks think it was going to, even though the MOU might have been perfectly straightforward. So does it even make sense to do it if we're not going to get what people think we're going to get from it? That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's that. When there's what, 5 of us here having the conversation, and then there's, you know, we've got the rest of the council that are going to ask the similar kind of questions. Like, okay, so why are we doing this?
Exactly.
I think there is value added now that you're bringing this up, because I'm thinking why not get them, because it's a different person reporting. It's not the director. It is a different person. They have their own point of view. So I think that's value added.
Yeah.
So I actually think it's good to leave them in, and they know what their reporting responsibilities are. So I don't think we should not have it.
And I'm not suggesting we shouldn't. I just want we should be clear on what we think we're going to be getting at.
I don't think we should be. I think leaving it general is, I mean, that would seem to benefit. Can you just give an example then of what you would say? Well, because then it,
like, so I would say,
but then it's like they don't have to report anything. Like,
I'll tell you what I think I would do. You know, because you guys made some really good points with, you know, Lisa can't be coming to.
She can. She's happy to.
Or maybe I'm just saying, like, it would be bad to have it. She comes that one time a year to do her thing. I think it would be really helpful to have these two folks come report out, kind of like we have committee reports where we attend meetings and we come back and say, hey, you know, attendance was up. They're, you know, planning these new things. Just give us an update of what's happening at the library.
How does that not solved by the language that we're using?
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying I would be okay with that for me.
Oh, that I heard something totally different.
What I'm saying is some other people may think we're getting different information. I got the impression that Kim was expecting maybe a little more.
What? No, I am, but I understand it's a compromise, I guess.
Yeah.
No,
and
so
can
we just put it on the table? Like, what do you think you're not getting out of this resolution that you would want? Like what, let's just get the rubber on the road here. Because if we're fighting about something that's theoretical,
we're fighting.
We're not fighting, but like it sounds like I'm unclear what you're afraid you're not going to get if we resolve this for the members of the
I mean, I think it's maybe an unrelated but related issue, which is the open meetings policy of the library, separate from this.
Well, we can't change that.
I understand.
I
understand. That's what I'm saying. That's a separate issue. But I do agree with Maria that I am concerned that someone is precluded from serving if they can't pay the fee. And we're the town that's approving something that's making someone pay a fee when we already give $10 million to the library, a $10 million loan, the center school lot, and 75% of the operating budget. I think these people are volunteers. I think they're doing enough than to have to pay to be on board, but that's me, so.
They don't have to take the job.
They don't have to do it, yeah, I mean.
It's entirely voluntary.
That's not fair. I mean, when the MOU was written, the idea is that it would give the townspeople some element of representation for the money that was going to this 501(c)(3) that didn't have open meetings. I mean, I think that was part of the agreement of the MOU, is that the town would have an element of public representation in exchange for the tax dollars. Right now, yeah, they can do their market research or base it on usage of the library and what's popular and whatnot, but this gave sort of the public a seat at the table. I mean, if we're going to rewrite the MOU, then we have to, that's
not rewriting the MOU. We're not rewriting the MOU. We're trying to give the people that might be floated just a little bit of guidance as to.
Oh, well, I mean, I was hearing that, like, is this even necessary? And maybe I'm misunderstanding that.
Yeah, my point, I'm trying to understand what the purpose is, and if this is actually going to meet that purpose, that expectation, and if it isn't, why bother, right? That's what I'm saying. But I'm not saying we should throw it out.
So like a lot of nonprofits, the board is, and Kevin and I both served on the library board. When I was on the library board, there was no required amount or even suggested amount. It was the fact that they wanted 100% of their board to be participating in their annual appeal or with their fundraising or whatever. So you were expected to be writing a check, but they didn't tell you, hey, this is a $20,000 board to be on, or 10, whatever, pick a number. That, I don't know today, Maria, if that policy has changed, because I'm way out as far as I've been on the board in decades, but it's the expectation on all of the boards in town is that you're going to participate in some way. I mean, there's no question that, and they're not going to say, hey, by the way, Steve Carl, he only gave $100 this year. It just doesn't. They're not going to do that. So,
but my point, this is a town recommended person, and that support comes through the tax dollars. So, sort of different. It's a trustee, but they're being suggested by the town council, whether or not they get nominated, but that is their contribution. It's every year, the operating costs.
Mark suggested that we could have a scholarship or some kind of a sliding scale or something. Like, what if someone who doesn't have the means wants to bring a new perspective to the board? Would they be able to be on it? And would they be a full member? Can we put a proviso in this MOU that says, that there's some flexibility on that?
It's up to the library, because we're just nominating 2 names.
Well, we don't know what their policy is specifically. Yeah. We could find that out and come back to this issue.
Yeah, I mean, my issue is sort of legal, is that if we're saying that they are exempt from certain requirements that other board of trustees members are required to do, their loyalties are divided. We're not paying them through our tax dollars. No. Like, I completely understand your point and what you guys are saying, but we're just supposed to be nominating them, and then the library decides, and the library says, these are your rights and responsibilities. And the only other thing we impose on them is that they come report to us, which quite frankly, we're not required to do.
Well, maybe we need a statement from the library about what are the requirements of the board and what is the money amount, so that we can then be aware of who to nominate. We don't even know who to nominate. What if someone doesn't have a $10,000 check and we nominate them? They're going to get rejected? I mean, I don't know what the amount is. So
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Does somebody here passionately believe that we need to have these trustees?
I know.
It's a deal already, though. It's part of the MOU.
Yeah,
I know, but that's a provision of the MOU that I think the library would willingly waive.
But that's why we put it in there.
No, for our benefit. We put it in for our benefit. Right?
That's what I'm saying. That's why I wasn't on then, but I was following the issue, and I think it was a very good thing that the town constituents liked it, that the town council was going to have some people on the library board. But now we're trying to work out the details.
But I'm guessing that you're not going to be happy unless there's some greater value than them just serving as a trustee. Is that fair?
We went around the block on that, and then we said, what about the money amount? And now we're on that amount. So
well, the money doesn't, we don't have anything to do with the money.
People want to solve the thing.
I don't understand what people want solved.
have more participation in like, what I'm saying is the two things are not, they're not meeting, like what people want this to be and what it is not.
Yeah.
That is not like.
Yeah, so that's why I'm still back to the question. The good news is we've identified 2 trustees for the library.
Great.
And they're ready and willing to go, but.
Do they have a checkbook? No.
But I still, every time I get into this issue, and this is what has taken so long to get here, it's like, okay, exactly what are we doing here? Like that's what stalls things for me. If it's clear, I'm all over.
Yeah.
But if it's foggy, it's like, why are we doing this? Why are we creating more government, or why are we creating more stuff?
Well, I mean,
It
I
seemed
know
like a good idea at the time.
but there are some boards like Westport that have all the people elected, that or many people. I don't know how many of them are elected, right?
Yeah.
So we give the library a certain amount of money. So I do like the responsibility and the accountability that they report to us. So can we try it? And if we hate it, I don't want to take it out, because I feel like it is a step in the direction of getting more information out to people.
But in those towns though,
That's sugar. You can't do that.
no, what I'm saying, I just this question is really, it's not redundant, it's not a rhetorical question.
Right.
In those towns, I understand being elected if the town is covering, like it's owning it, it's, you know.
If you mean, is it an association library, or is it, is it
Whatever
library?
terminology, yes.
I
If it's run by the town and paid completely by the town, it's not a private entity, then I would say having an elected person on it, that makes sense.
I think,
but
there
this
is
seems
hybrid,
different.
there is hybrid solutions, like some association libraries have elected,
right?
Some public libraries have elected, but I don't know the whole scope of what every town does.
But it sounds like the things that you mentioned as examples are things that have nothing to do with the functioning of these trustees. You know, that their meetings should be open. You know, that's a valid question.
Yeah, it's a separate.
It's a separate.
Yeah, I understand.
Are they gonna do our bidding and like put that into the meeting? Like, are they gonna come up to a meeting and say, "We're town council"? I know. I know. I know. That I'm saying is, I know, but that's.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's not crystal clear what the point of this exercise is. Right. And Kevin started out by saying, you know, it maybe felt like more relevant before we built the building, but now that it's there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the good news is we found 2 great nominees, but I still.
I'll take it to the Chamber of Music Board. That's what I'll do.
Why don't you just write a letter and say to them, you know, would you come and talk to us? You don't need this, just write a letter and say, you'd like to put you on the agenda.
I think I listened to everyone, and I think you all have valid points, but I do think people who had put the money in whatever into the library want this to happen. And I'm not saying me personally. My sense is the general public does like this idea. Now we're trying to flesh out what does it really mean. But I think since we gave so much money to the library and the meetings are closed, so that's somewhat connected to my point, they do like the idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. Your suggestion of trying it is good. But I would say that if we try it and it doesn't work, we need to pull the ripcord on this thing and, it quickly, because it's like, we're talking about 2 guys that are extraordinarily busy. And we're asking them to give up a couple of nights a year, which they have limited numbers of, to come in and see us. So I just want to make sure that we're doing this for all the right reasons and that we're actually accomplishing something out of having them come.
So can we do it for like a year?
They get appointed for 3 years. Once the library, and again, we don't know what their bylaws provide, we don't know what their requirements are. I think that they serve for 3 years. I think that's the agreement, which presumably these nominees have probably figured that out. I think their only question was, what am I going to be expected to do when I come before town council? Am I going to face a gauntlet, or am I going to, is it going to be a general position? I mean, I think that's a fair question. So, and I am hesitant to subject them to something that's beyond the scope of what it means to sit on the board of trustees, which is why I said it might be helpful to either have them come once they get a feel for it and tell us what the board of trustees does, Or we have somebody come that is on the board of trustees that can tell us what they do, before, so that we can get comfort with it, but.
I think you're right. I think it's just kind of funny that we don't know what they do. We're just gonna wait for 6 months and then they're gonna tell us, like, oh, this is a good idea. Or maybe
They need one,
it's funny.
If you're gonna have a trial,
funny, then
if you're gonna have a trial arrangement,
let's just repeat it, let's just take it out. I mean, it's kind of,
We are talking in circles.
it's kind, do we want it or do we not?
I think the townspeople want it because of all the money that went into the library. They like the idea of having a formal reporting thing. We don't know what they're gonna say yet because we're talking this, right? But anything, I think anything's better than nothing.
so do you support the proposed language then?
Well, can we change it to make it more specific? You're saying we can't.
How would you change it? That I would like.
I'm talking about matters relevant to the town.
I think that implies a loyalty to the town instead of to the library.
No, just a reporting expectation. It doesn't have a loyalty. They're loyal to the library, but we want them to report to us, like, not like what kind of cleaning fluid they're using in the bathroom.
No, of course not.
We want them to matters relevant to town and townspeople. It's very general.
I don't think that makes sense, but
Well,
that's fine.
So that
Because-
opens the door to,
That's way down.
that opens the door to a town council member or leader, whatever, sending a note saying, by the way, this month, I want to let you know what's relevant to the town. And it's X and Y and Z.
Maybe it's an iterative process. That's called communication. And they can always say no. The board can say, well, you know what, we don't want to talk about that.
Well, what,
But who decides what's relevant to the town?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Who decides, like, where?
The person that's doing this job. The person we nominated.
So you could ask them a question and they could conceivably say, I don't think this is relevant to the town, so I'm gonna not answer that. I don't know, it's setting up, I feel like it's setting up.
They're not gonna not answer it, but I think they're gonna get their limits from the board and we have their expectations. It's a new relationship. You have to work it out. I don't know all the
Here's
ins and
here's
outs.
a scenario that I'm just considering. Say we're in a meeting. They're being presented stuff. Do they then at the end go, okay, out of what you just said, what are you comfortable with us sharing to, like, I don't know, maybe there's some proprietary thing they shouldn't be sharing because they don't want, I don't know, if they're competition to know, I don't know. But are these folks that we're putting in there gonna be under like, are they gonna feel like they need to understand, like, okay, what can I share, what
Yes.
can I share? They're gonna have to, like,
Yes, because it's consistent with their role in governance.
so after every meeting, they're gonna have to, how do they know?
well,
How will they know?
so by law, library trustees or any trustee has an obligation to advocate for their organization.
Right,
And so that concept assumes that somebody's gonna, but they also have a duty of obedience to the organization. So yes, of course, they should know
yeah.
whether,
They know that.
whether it fulfills the
I don't
mission
know,
of the
I've been in
library.
meetings where I wasn't sure, I had to say, well, you know, like at the end, is this shareable, is this not shareable? Is this point shareable, is that shareable? Like,
Yes, why
I
wouldn't they
think
do that?
that's onerous for us to expect them to have to do that.
To know what's public information that they
But
can
to
share?
be able to know what to share and not to share.
But what I want to make crystal clear is that when they're making that decision, they're making it on the basis of their obligation to the library, right? And not to the town. So
Yeah, I mean, hopefully.
I'm not so thrilled about this concept anymore. I'll tell you the truth. The more
I
we
mean,
talk.
there would be a lot of situations where they have to worry about that.
It might be, what if there was like a real estate transaction that they're contemplating, like they will, I think it will be clear.
That's scary. A real estate.
Can you use a different example? It's not really making my comfort. Like that, they go into executive session, and like, I don't actually think it's that. But I would assume if they're only meeting us twice a year, that they would probably sit with Lisa before coming here and saying, here's what we plan to present. I mean, I think that's, or Bob Butman, Bill Butman. Bob.
Could be a 5-minute phone call.
Yeah, it could be.
The point is that it's up to them.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a council, you want these liaisons to come back to their board and say, you know what? We like working with the town. These are nice people. Everything is smooth. We have a great relationship. And that's the way it should be. I mean, but if we put this person into a meeting where, you know, it's 9 o'clock at night and we just had a contentious thing that we're doing on the council, and all of a sudden like everybody's eyeballs are going to this guy, and we're gonna cross-examine this representative from the library. It's just like, why are we doing that to ourselves? I don't understand.
I don't think
How
that's
we're
gonna
gonna have
happen.
nominees.
I don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I think that we're gonna be grateful that they're doing it.
Okay, well, as long as we go in with that expectation,
Yeah.
then I would say then we should, you know,
Give it a shot.
give it a shot. But again, I have a real problem with foggy stuff, and I'm hoping that the language that we choose here allows them, and we remember that this is what we want, you know, because, you know, long after we're all gone, there'll be folks here trying to figure out what in the world were we doing this for? You know?
Can I make a suggestion? I'd like to move on. Let's
Come on.
let's put out a, let's put out an email to town council members,
Yeah.
okay, and say, tell us the specific things that you want in the requirements of these members, and, you know, and also we'll, in the meantime, we'll find out what their financial obligation is, and we'll come back to this issue again.
So unfortunately then, because, you know, we had the library teed up, they have a July annual meeting, and this would tee up to Wednesday where we would nominate these folks, and then they would be able to go to the library and get on the board. But the way this looks tonight is that we're not going to do this, and Wednesday we'll strike it from our agenda, I guess, because it's on the agenda to appoint these folks so that the cadence works, but nominate. Thank you. You know, that's, which is fine with me. I mean, you know, I just want to let you know what.
Does that mean they can't till next year?
No, they can get on, but we don't meet, usually we don't meet in August.
Oh, we get July then.
The fact that this isn't urgent sort of makes a point about it.
Well, I think it's urgent that the nominees are curious to know what's going on.
Well,
They're
yeah.
trying to plan.
Yeah.
And, you know.
One of the nominees is in Paris with his wife, and I texted him that could he get me his CV ASAP, because I know him very well, but not everybody knows. So he's like, yeah, as soon as I get home, I'm home on Wednesday. So he's literally answering a text on vacation with his wife from Paris, and you know, it's that's what we do though in New Canaan. We answer the call.
Yeah.
Wheels of government.
I think it's lovely that these two have stepped up to do this, and that they, you know, seemingly, I don't know if they've spoken to any other library board members. I would assume that they had before taking this on. I don't, you know, my personal opinion is that we shouldn't micromanage them, and they were looking for some general guidelines, just some comfort that they're not gonna come and be, you know.
Vague isn't bad from the perspective of saying to them, we're not micromanaging how you're going to report to us. That should give you comfort. You know, we just want you to fulfill your role and come and sit and have a conversation with us. It's just that.
I don't want to set up an expectation that be happening, and that's
For who?
For the town council. That's what my concern is.
An expectation of what?
I said, no, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I just don't want to set up an expectation that they're not going to, you know.
Right. So basically, what's going to be the content of their reporting back to the town council? What they want to do, you know, what they're inclined to do.
I'm fine with moving it forward based on the timeline. I would just, if there's any way for the next people that get nominated, if there could be some kind of scholarship proviso or something that is, you know, if someone wants to be on, really wants to do this and can't afford whatever the fee is, if they could figure that out.
So do we have a motion to adopt this language and take it to the town council?
I'll make the motion.
Oh, great. Second?
Second.
Rita, all in favor? All right.
Maria's not been voting.
Maria, oh, I'm sorry, Maria. What was your?
Can you clarify, we're adopting the language in the email, and will this be part of, we're adopting it to bring it to the full town council?
Right.
And then will it be on the agenda Wednesday?
Isn't it already?
Yeah, so the nominees are on the agenda to vote in. And I'm happy, Maria, if you want to have the conversation. We actually should have the conversation in public about what what you guys did tonight. Here's the language. We'll read it into the minutes, and so that everybody's clear on exactly what these nominees are going to do. So that's important, because I keep saying, when we write this stuff, we're not going to be around forever. And, you know, people have to be able to figure out exactly what we're doing.
Should we vote again? Because we decided that.
Oh,
Or do we need to take a different vote because it wasn't?
Oh, fair point.
yeah. No, we just need to note that. So
What's
Maria, are you voting yes to move it to the full town council, or are you voting no?
Yes, to move it to the full town council. I just wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely.
okay,
Good clarification.
great.
and again, to clarify the nominees, it's Doug Stewart, who hopefully all of you know from Stewart's Market, and Mark DeWhaley, who is former town council chair and extremely active. Mark DeWhaley. So Mark DeWhaley was a chair of town council. He was on Parks and Rec. Then he served on town council. Then he was nominated to the chair of town council and served for a couple of years as chair. And one of the things he asked me was, "You're not putting me back in the firing line, are you?" No.
Well, so he'd be a good judge of what the town was fair about. He's got.
And would be able to juggle.
Yeah, I think he would be the person.
And on
really
top of that,
understand
he served as chairman of the board of the State Hospital. So he's
Yeah.
pretty.
Whoa.
He's pretty.
Oh, yeah.
He's pretty qualified.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing. I really do believe that I know it's great that you want to support organizations. They need to have. If you're on the trustee, you have to contribute because things run. They need money. But I really do get the point that we want to be able to represent not just the library, but just in general. We do want to represent all people, and if it's only people that have money that get into certain positions, we just want to be aware of that. We want to. I think it's a good idea to keep in mind in general that anything that we do.
Good point.
Then we should look at the Board of Finance too, about property ownership again. I guess that was part of it. We require the Board of Finance members to be property owners here too. So that,
Well, there's all different.
Well, property owners is
Yeah.
it's not necessarily. I think no. I don't necessarily agree or disagree. I'm just saying it might be a different issue.
I know, I think
That's a little-
that's
I
a
think
library board
Unrelated.
determination. I don't know that we can.
No, I understand, but there was a suggestion that if scholarship for that position, that not to change how the library does stuff. And again, it's not just about the library. I'm saying representation in general.
Yeah, because we're not
Government representation in general. It's something to think about. That's all. That's all.
If town council's nominating them, we're saying anyone should be eligible to be nominated. It's not just someone who can write a certain amount of checks. So I think that does get on the line to be more sensitive to that issue.
Okay. This last one is really intended to just serve as an update. As you may know, that we have 9 accepted nominees for the Utilities Commission, and that's wonderful. But along the way, as Kathleen Corbett was putting the list together, she realized that a lot of them had full-time jobs and they work and they commute and whatever. And will there be issues with 9 people? And so maybe it should be a smaller group. So what I took the liberty of telling Kathleen, rather than just hear this as a concern from you, ask the 9 people what they think about this. Her proposal is that it should be 7 regular members and 3 alternates. And I don't want to try to decide this tonight. I just want to get a progress report because I don't have an hour and a half.
Well, I think it's important too that the Board of Selectmen approved the 9 people already, so it's not like, I can't imagine yes, if we were to change the Utilities Commission ordinance now, like who's gonna decide who the alternates are?
Well, that would all have to be done by the commission.
Right.
They would have to come back and say, yes, this is what we want to do. We want 7 and 3. These guys are happy to be alternates and blah, blah, blah.
I don't think so. The selecting would have to.
Oh,
Yeah.
not us.
Commission can't do this.
What is
Commission can't do
it?
something.
No, but I'd like to, I'm not asking them to take an action. I just want to know, are they comfortable with that? Do they even think there's a reason to do it?
Yeah, I mean, what is a quorum for 9? I mean,
5.
so I think you'd have, I don't understand the logic. We've already done this twice. We've gone from 5 to 9 to 7. I mean, we've already spent $12,000.
I'm ready to
Where
vote.
someone said they would pay for it themselves, but I said, you know, we can't take that. I mean, it has to be government money. I don't understand. You have to notice it in the New Canaan advertisement. It's this ordinance is like this long. I feel like the people, like you said, the people who have stepped up on the library. These people have been through a very rigorous vetting process. They're ready to go. They're really excited. Why are we making them feel like, you know, like the musical chairs? We're gonna pull this chair out. You're an alternate.
Well,
Why
it's,
are we doing
it's,
that?
and their first meeting's Thursday. too.
Yeah, why are we,
So
why,
we're not-
we're not
that's not
doing
doing anything. We're not doing that
It's
tonight.
on the table to do it.
So,
You know,
so let me just,
I don't think that's very nice.
okay, you're, and well, we're always nice. We're not trying to not be nice, but
Exactly.
so the reason we're even having this conversation is that it's a extremely high class problem.
Yeah.
We scored the touchdown and did all this, but the extra point was, wow, there's another person that is really good. That is not just really good, like we've got like Joe Namath coming to the team, right? He's a great guy to have on the team, but we already formed the team. So how do we do this? The only other way would be have 9 and 1 alternate, which doesn't make any sense, but you know, it's just a really high class problem in a super talented town. And it's the kind of problem that most towns would love to have. So that's all I'll say. So, and that's why we're even having the conversation. So we would be improving ourselves if we could figure out a way to get this person involved. I'm not saying we're going to figure it out tonight, but that's all.
That's behind it.
And I have no connection to this person. I don't know the person. All I'm saying is I've heard amazing things about this, you know, so.
So I'm just saying, it's no longer on our table. If somebody brings it back to us and asks for us to take action, then we'll have had this background conversation.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn? What's that?
I have more yarn.
We gave you plenty of yarn, baby. You knitted a lot on our nickel. Yeah.
Okay, you guys can close up first.
Great. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion
Kim.
to adjourn.
Second.
Good night, Maria.
I'll do it.
Aye.
All in favor? Stand adjourned. Thank you very much.